Oh, it's time for another bicycle live stream. 6:53 a.m. on Sunday, June the 13th. Somebody's birthday today. Happy birthday, somebody. It's 10 degrees. Just taken my balaclava off, and it's noticeably cold. Still got the gloves on though. And I've taken a million photographs. That sounds like a slight exaggeration. Maybe just under a million, of the most perfect winter's dawn this morning. The rays of the sun before it broke the horizon were just astounding. So I'll be sharing that with you later. So this morning's topic is the difference. It's a bit of a long title. The difference between observing and judging, and the effect that not forgiving has on us. What does not forgiving do to us? So this came up in the last week. A lot of comments around not being able to forgive people that have wronged us or wronged others, including animals. And it's a topic that I have spoken about probably at least twice before on live stream. And I want to start off by reading to you something that I wrote. Yes, I can read and ride a bicycle at the same time. Something that I wrote in a moment of clarity about a year ago. So it goes like this. If you could see the energy, the aura of those around you, including yourself, how much differently would you treat them? How much clearer would you see and understand the struggles your fellow spiritual brothers and sisters are going through? In seeing your own darkness, you would begin to understand the energy behind their evil behavior. You would begin to realize how lost they are in their search for happiness. You would begin to feel compassion for them, not judgment for their behavior. You would separate the sinner from the sin. And I finish up by saying it's easy to love those we find lovable, but could you forgive someone who murdered your partner or had done something equally awful? And if you didn't forgive them, what would holding on to that judgment do, and that judgment, and what would holding on to that judgment and anger do to your health? Would it affect them at all, or would it only ruin your own life? So that's setting the tone for this morning's live stream. So let's start with the difference between observation and judgment. There's a real negative connotation that I've noticed for decades and decades and decades around judgment. And it's really quite interesting, you know. If you say something about someone, somebody will very quickly jump down your throat and say, oh, you're judging them. And, you know, it's a real picking up on that being a negative thing. I've found that fascinating over the years, how quickly people sort of jump on that and say, oh, you're judging them. I'm not quite sure, and it doesn't really fit into this morning's live stream. Not quite sure why that is, but anyway, let's move on and say good morning to Matt as well. Good rising, Brother Bear. Good rising, Brother Bear. Back to you, Matt. Thank you for watching. But there is a very negative connotation in society about judging. In relation to that, there is a lack of discernment between observation and judging. Now, observing what someone is doing is non-critical. By nature, it is non-critical. We are simply observing what someone is doing. Someone might be doing something that we deem positive or negative, and we simply observe it. Where the negative connotation that people have in relation to judgment comes in is when we take that observation of someone's behavior and we assign a value to it. We say what they're doing is good or bad, but we go further. We don't just look at their behavior and assign the value of it's good or bad. We assign a value to them. We say, you are a bad person because you did this. Now, this is interesting because the negativity surrounding judgment doesn't seem to fall on the positives judgments and only on the negatives. So when we judge someone, oh yeah, they're a saint and they've done wonderful things and, you know, they're always helping people out, and we're judging the person as being a positive person. Isn't it interesting that there's no negativity around that value of judgment? You know, that's like, oh, it's wonderful what they're doing. We're still judging them. We're saying what they're doing is wonderful. What they're doing may not be wonderful. What they're doing may have negative consequences for others or for the environment or for themselves. But we see it in our observation, in our perception, in our relative truth. We see what they're doing as a good thing, and we assign a positive value to it. Now, in society, there's not normally people having an issue with that. Where we have an issue is when we assign a negative value to the character of the person because they're doing something that we deem to not be of good, what we deem to not be good behaviour. And so we say that that person is, you know, of lesser value because of that. And judgments can become quite hostile, quite threatening, quite direct, quite nasty. And it is interesting to just observe ourselves in the way we think about others and their behaviour and say to ourselves, ask ourselves, are we observing what they're doing, or are we digging into a negative judgment of what they're doing? Because the reason why that's important to ask ourselves is because that judgment doesn't affect the other person. That judgment affects ourselves, our health, our state of mind, our peace of mind, our spiritual connection, our emotional balance, all these different areas where it is affected by a negative energy that we are hanging on to because we deem that person to not be worthy of our consideration or to not be worthy of living or whatever that negative judgment is. Now, from a spiritual perspective, we have never had the right to do that to another living being because we don't know their full journey. We don't know what's gone on in their previous lifetimes. We don't know, you know, why somebody becomes a Hitler and what they had previously in previous lifetimes endured. We don't have that vision. So we don't have that right to throw that at somebody and say, well, I know everything about you and I'm judging you. No, you don't. You see so little of the person. You see so little of yourself that all you're doing is observing somebody through the false ego and judging them from that perspective. And that can't help yourself, and it doesn't help society. So then this brings us to the point about holding on to that energy brings out an anger in us, an irritation, a frustration, a depression. We are hanging on to The only way we can judge someone and hold a negative thought about them is to hang on to, not let go of, hang on to an energy that is destructive internally to us. An energy that will give us ulcers, sleepless nights, other health problems, mental disturbances, emotional disturbances, spiritual disconnection. So it serves absolutely no useful purpose to be hanging on to a judgment about someone else. All it does is makes our false ego, who always needs to be right, feel better about itself. I'm better than that person because that person is a shithead. That's all it's about from our false ego. So forgiveness comes about when we have the wisdom to realize that that energy we're holding onto is a poison and it's only killing us. It's not affecting the other person. They're holding onto their own stuff, but it is affecting us and it is destructive to our health. So wisdom comes about when we see that and we say, well, this is serving no one there's no positive outcome to hanging on to anger, and there's no positive outcome to not forgiving someone. I've spoken about this before. It is essential for us to forgive others for our own health and for the peace of society. It is essential. If we don't do it, we create a hostile society. And thanks for your comments there, Matt. He says, wise words, bro. Thanks, Matt. So knowing that it is essential, knowing that we cannot be in a state of personal peace unless we let go of the negative energy surrounding anger and judgment. The final point of this live stream is how? How do we do it? We do it. We forgive others when we realize that they are just as lost as us. When we love the sinner, not the sin. When we realize that underneath all their confusion, all their evil behavior, they are not that behavior. They are a perfect spirit soul that is so lost that it is behaving in a way that no healthy, happy person would do. So when we have that wisdom, that vision, we feel that sense of compassion, and we automatically want the best for the other person. We automatically become the well-wisher of others. So I hope this has given you something to think about and to meditate on. And thank you for watching. Let me just find a safe spot to pull up here. Oh, and I'm hoping the day warms up a bit for you, because what's it? It's 9 degrees. It got cooler for me now. Anyway, live vegan and save lives. Ahimsa.